Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest Legal Cheek virtual student event run in partnership with BPP University Law School. I'm Erin Williams. I'm a Senior Events Coordinator here at Legal Cheek, and I'm thrilled to introduce this afternoon's session, which is the second in a series of SQE-themed virtual events that we are running in partnership with BPP, which explore everything to do with the SQE. In our first event of the series, we discussed why the SQE is so hard to pass, and you can find the recording of this session on our website. In addition to this, we have curated a list of frequently asked questions from students in regards to the SQE, and this can be found on our SQE FAQs page, and my colleague will post a link to this page in the chat in just a moment. So today's session will be chaired by Caroline Rayson, who is the SQE1 Programmes Award Leader at BPP. Caroline will be joining us in just a moment, but until then, I will be continuing the discussion. And we are also joined by Grace, Samantha, and Farouk, who are our panel of current SQE students who will be sharing their insights into the SQE, covering topics from study techniques, course structure, practical experience, and the importance of maintaining well-being. So before I get straight into the discussion, I would just like to do a quick bit of housekeeping. So during the panel discussion, please feel free to put any questions you may have for the speakers in the chat, and you will find that on the right-hand side of your screen. Before you do put any questions in the chat, just make sure you have your chat set to stage as opposed to event so that we can see all the questions coming through. Today's discussion will be running from 4 p.m. until 5 p.m. And then we'll be going on to an hour of networking with the speakers and the BPP University Law School team. So please don't worry if we don't get around to answering your question during the panel discussion, because there will be plenty of opportunities to ask your questions during the networking portion of the event. And I'll pop back up on stage at 5 to direct everyone over to the networking. As I can see, Caroline's now joined us, so that's great. How are you doing, Caroline?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Perfect, that's great. So in that case, I'll hand over to Caroline for the discussion.
Thanks very much, Erin, and welcome everybody. Lovely to be here and to help you understand lots about the SQE, hopefully demystify it for you. I'm really looking forward to chatting with my colleagues here who I will get to introduce themselves in just a second. If we could just go to the next slide, I'll just talk about what we're going to cover. Apologies if I repeat anything Erin's just said while I was working my way into the room. So we will cover a bit about BPP. So I'll talk about what we do, what we are. Obviously, very happy to take any questions on that. I'll give you an overview of the SQE, and I'll get the students to help me with that, because it's not so new anymore, but it is something which a lot of people take a little bit of understanding. We'll talk about the kinds of courses you can do, the pass rates for the SQE, which I know will be very important and interesting to the students here, who a lot of whom are in the middle of all of these things. Choosing the right SQE course for you, give you some thoughts on the sorts of things you should be taking into account and how best to prepare yourself. So I'm going to ask the students who are here to just briefly give an introduction of themselves, what their background is, where they are in their SQE journey, please. So can I start with Sam, please?
Yeah, hello, thank you. So my name's Sam. I came to law as a mature student after having 3 children. So I went and did my LLB in law at University of Essex, and then I did an LLM in international human rights law. And then after that, I sought out a firm who I could undertake my qualifying legal work experience with, and did some research on, routes to qualify and how I would go about doing that, and came across a graduate solicitor apprentice, which I thought was really useful, especially for someone with a young family like me. to sort of study and work at the same time. And so I found a firm who was willing to sponsor me with that. And so I started with Fisher Jones Greenwood in Colchester nearly 2.5 years ago now. I'm coming to the end of that process. And it's been a wonderful experience. I took SQE 1 in July last year. I passed SQE 1, and then I went on to take SQE 2 in October, and I'm awaiting results from that.
Brilliant, thank you, Sam. And those are coming out in about 10 days' time, aren't they? So you are poised, ready for those.
They are.
Which will be great.
Yes, very much so.
It takes a long time for the SQE2 results to be processed, so they'll be worth the wait, I'm sure. Farouk, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, so my name is I graduated from Lancaster University literally just August, yeah. So it's been August now, and straight into the SQE with BPP. I'm also a future trainee solicitor with Teacher Stern. They're a London City law firm, and I've just sat the SQE 1 literally like I want to say 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Still on the top of my mind. So anything you want to ask me, I am more than happy to share my thoughts on the exam, the process, and how I'll give a bit of optimism here. It's not as much nightmare fuel as you guys might actually think. So hopefully to obviously set some expectations that a lot of you might have. But yeah, that's just a bit about me.
Brilliant, thanks, Farouk. Yes, good luck to you for your results, which are 11th of March. I happen to know because SQE1 is my bag. Okay, and then Grace, tell us about yourself.
Hi, so I studied undergraduate law at Oxford University, and now I'm doing my SQE2. So I sat SQE1 in July and passed it, and then I took a bit of time out to work in a law firm, and now studying for SQE2 to sit in April and May.
Brilliant, thank you very much indeed, Grace. So 3 people with us today, we're really lucky, who are absolutely at the coalface and really know what they're talking about on the SQE side of things. So thank you for your readiness to share with everybody and to help them understand. So just a little bit more about BPP very briefly then in that case. If I could just move on to the next slide, please. So building careers through education is what we do. And really, the important thing to understand about BPP Law School is that we have been preparing very large numbers of students to go through the professional exams to be a solicitor or a barrister for over 30 years as a law firm. We have a lot of very big clients, but actually we have a lot of clients across the board who send their students to us to get trained up for the SQE. But many people also, as you'll see in the middle of the slide, fund themselves, and we have programs that people can self-fund with the help of masters funding, government masters funding as well. We are across the country. I think Farouk was saying that you're in Leeds, Farouk, aren't you? Yes, you are. So that's an example of one of the regional centres that we have. I personally am based in London. A lot of our students are, but many people are in different places, including Manchester, Leeds, Bristol, Cambridge, Birmingham. In terms of SQE pass rates, we'll get to that a bit later on. As you can imagine, in these early days of the SQE, information on how everybody is doing on the SQE is relatively hard to come by. We've done our very best to be quite open about our pass rates in these really quite difficult exams, and we'll come to that a little bit more in a little while. But we are very pleased to report that our students do considerably better than the national average when it comes to passing the SQE. If we move on to the next slide, just in terms of other firms, and if you just click once more, please, you'll see some really big names there, but actually, in addition to those big names, you'll see on this slide a real range of firms who send their students exclusively to us. So you've got big city firms, but also regional firms. You've got the government legal department there, a number of smaller, more family or private client type setups. So lots of different firms trust us with their students. Now, I think Erin will have mentioned at the start that we will be taking account of questions that you've submitted in advance as we go. So I'm going to work through these slides, but I've got noted down in front of me a number of questions that have been submitted by delegates to this session, and I will be taking some myself, but I'll be going to my student colleagues as well in due course. And I think, let's just say with the student colleagues, if you'd like to answer a question, if you don't mind just putting up your hand, just literally putting up your hand, if you'd like to take a particular question, that would be brilliant. So the SQE pathway, we've talked already a little bit about SQE1 and SQE2. This diagram just shows you the 4 things you need to have pulled together these days in this new world to qualify as a solicitor. So you need to have a degree or the equivalent of a degree. Now we know that the 3 colleagues with us today have all got a degree either in law or something else. You need to have passed SQE1 and SQE2, and I'll talk about what they are in a minute, but you do one before the other in broad terms. You need to have undertaken qualifying work experience. Now that is a new regime, an SQE regime concept, qualifying work experience, and it's much more free form than we used to have in the old training contract world and the LPC, which is how I qualified myself. You don't have that same need to find 2 years training contract with a single provider, which was always quite difficult for people to obtain. Now you can be much more blended with what you use, and you could have undertaken your qualifying work experience in advance or during or after your studies. And somebody who's an apprentice, for example, like Sam, would have done a bit of both at the same time. Final thing, top left there, you need to be a suitable character. Now I'm going to assume everybody on this call is of excellent good character, but just be aware there are certain questions and declarations you need to be able to make to become a solicitor. All right, so we talk about SQE1 and SQE2. Let me just, I've got a couple of questions here. Let's just talk about those before we move on. So first one, this is from somebody at the University of Leeds. How do you recommend balancing preparation for the SQE exams with gaining practical legal experience? Is one more or less important in employers' eyes, do you think? Anybody want to take that one before we go any further? Sam?
Yeah, I chose to take this question because I am a particular person that advocates for doing both at the same time. While it is a juggle, and obviously I'm a mother of 3, so I know, a little bit about juggling, and it's definitely a juggle to work and study at the same time. I think it provides like a huge amount of benefit for both areas. In terms of the study, what you're learning from a practical perspective, and quite a lot of the SQE is based is much more practical than you would learn in a law degree. You have a direct opportunity to reinforce and consolidate all of that learning in your daily workplace, and so much of it is transferable. I mean, for the 2.5 years I've spent my time in the family department, and that isn't tested on the SQE as an area of law. However, I have used so much of that knowledge because it is, some of it is transferable. You also have the benefit of speaking to people who are working in legal practice, which adds a layer to your study and your understanding of the law that you wouldn't have if you only did studying as an isolated sort of activity and then went on to do the work experience. I think it's much more beneficial to do both at one time. I think sometimes people are put off by the fact that it can take a little bit longer to get there, but that is also a benefit in my mind. That little bit longer gives you an edge. I think in some circumstances, the organisation skills that you then get from work are then transferable to your study time. So I think as long as you have have a great structure, a good plan, are well organized, and can manage your time well, I think doing both at once is really ideal. And in terms of what employers are looking for, they're looking for, in my opinion, in my experience, well-rounded individuals. They're not looking for someone who does incredibly well in their academic study but has no experience whatsoever. And that on the same factor, they're not looking for someone who has loads of experience but would struggle on the SQE because they don't have any academic experience. I think employers are looking for people who are well balanced, and so to do both at the same time shows a level of skill in, as I said, organization, time management, things that are really important to lawyers. And so I always advocate for a study and work approach alongside each other.
Thanks, Sam. There's actually a second question from somebody from Rural Holloway who's just asking about, is there an advantage of doing the SQE before securing a training contract? And I think it's a similar area. I mean, I think Sam's right that allowing the two to inform each other can be very helpful. Now, one way to do that is to do an apprenticeship in the way that Sam is. Another way would be, for example, to work as a paralegal whilst studying part-time. That's another way of doing it. And I think you're right that people can see those legal skills being used in practice. And it helps them be able to, I would say before we move, no hard and fast way that you must do this. And that's back to what I was saying about the flexibility of qualifying work experience, which is a real benefit of this new regime. Quite a lot of people maybe have paralegal already and might be able to use that as qualifying work experience before they then go into their learning, for example. Okay, all right. We'll come back to these themes later. So let's move on for now, because let's talk about what SQE 1 and 2 actually are. So SQE 1 you can think of as being the knowledge test of SQE. And it's quite a significant knowledge test, because what you are being assessed on is both what we call underlying law subjects and practice subjects. So the underlying law subjects are those in blue on that slide, and the practice subjects are those in black on the slide. Now, the underlying law subjects generally, and this is how we do it, this is how a lot of providers do it, they say to come and study with us, you need to have already studied those subjects. Because although the SRA says you don't necessarily need a law degree, we firmly believe that you do, or that you need to have done a conversion, because you need, in these big exam papers, to be able to answer technical questions on contract and tort and trusts. Because those underlying law questions will be about half of the questions on SQE 1. And then the other half will be subjects which, if you study with us or with a lot of other providers, will then be taught as practice subjects. So that's things like business law and practice and property practice. So they're the sort of the practical application of that underlying law. Business law and practice is a lot about companies. There's a bit about partnerships and that sort of thing as well. But mainly it's, practically speaking, how do you work with companies? How do you incorporate them? How do they do things? All of that good stuff, which is enormously useful as a foundation for you going into practice. Okay, so you've got two papers that you sit in SQE 1. So you split up that mixture of subjects, practice and underlying law, in two different papers. Each paper consists of 180 multiple choice questions, which are sat on a single day. Each paper sat on a single day, takes 5 hours 6 minutes per paper, which you sit in two halves. This is why Farouk is saying it's very, very vivid in his mind, I suspect. It's a very intense experience. The way that it works these days is you'll sit paper 1 in 1 week, and then you'll sit paper 2 in the following week. You sit online in Pearson VUE test centres across the country, or actually in some places overseas as well. And they are extremely closed book. Okay, before we go to your questions, I might just go to Farouk and get him to give his headlines of what it's actually like to sit SQE1.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like every other SQE1 student, a few weeks before the exam, we were all just terrified. It's like this unmovable wall, but actually it can't be moved. You've seen the pass rates from BPP. You've seen people pass the exam. It is doable, but obviously when you're 2 weeks, 3 weeks behind the actual exams, and you're like, oh my days, I've not done contract law, I've not done this. It's a difficult experience, I guess, just from a mental point. But for me, I think it was a morning. I literally put on. I'm not sure if you guys have seen like Attack on Titan, some kind of anime. I literally put on the most like rock metal music in my head, and I was like, there's nothing's going to stop me from passing this exam or like getting me there, because I think the biggest one I found with speaking with other people is fear. The fear, if you have that on the day, it is going to put you off. It's going to always be at the back of your mind. So I was like, let's just go through it, like just rock through it, I guess, whatever. The test center, the experience, at least for myself, was in quite a small test center. I know the London one is quite big and other people are sitting different exams. But for me personally, the smaller test center definitely helped. The invigilators, they're quite helpful as well. They knew what the test was. So it was like they had sympathy for us, I guess. That then this is like a monster exam almost. So they were very kind to us. Which I don't think they'd expect for anyone else, because they know how much obviously this probably means to law students, I guess. So essentially, the day, as obviously Caroline mentioned, it's split up into obviously 2 halves. There is a 1 hour break. It is like a crawl almost. The first 90 questions, will go quite fast. You won't even remember half the questions. And then you get that 1 hour break, and then they're like, time to go to break. And it's that entire experience is just like, what have I just sat, for example? And then you have to push it out, if I'm being honest. Like in that hour break, you have to go get some fresh air, because you have another 90 to go. That 90 that you just sat, okay, you might have got some wrong and it's on your mind, but you've got another 90 to go through. So my like quick advice would be just ignore that first half. You've got another 90, you get to go again, I guess. So just think of like another round, like a replay match in football, for instance. You get another go, essentially. So that was in my mind. I sat the next half, and then I just went home and just slept. That was it. I was like, I've got FLK2 now. It is out of mind, out of sight. And even to this day, I'm obviously doing the SQE2 preparation course with BPP again. And like this isn't just me. Like the rest of my friends and classmates, like we don't care. We need to focus on SQE2 right now. We just have to have in our mind the mindset that yes, we've passed, just so we can focus on SQE2. So I'd say that's probably my best advice for FLK1 at least.
Thanks very much, Farouk. Yeah, vivid stories there, and I could see the others nodding along, so I think their experience was similar. Of course, I'm just looking at some of the questions, and they're asking about some of the ways in which you prepared yourselves. Somebody from the University of Worcester is saying that they've taken a few years out from completing the GDL to save up to do the SQE. What should I do to get ready to start preparing for the SQE? Should I go over and familiarise myself with the core subjects again, for example? Grace, would you mind taking that one?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say definitely familiarise yourself with the core subjects, but I would say be careful in how you do this, because you don't want to just go over your notes from the GDL, because you want it to be SQE specific. So if you just Google SQE1 SRA assessment specification, that is something that I would majorly focus on, because that is a list. It can be quite a vague list, but it's a list of everything that they can test you on. So find that specification, find it for those underlying subjects and then go back to your notes. Also, make sure that your notes are up to date, because for me, again, I was tested on some of the things I sat maybe 5 years ago, and potentially the laws changed. So you could just check that you are using kind of up to date. If the law might have changed in that area, just double check that. But yeah, I would use the specification and then go over those notes, because they are maybe 50% of what they'll test you on. So it's really important. And then when you start, because you won't be having necessarily classes on those subjects, you'll have already like a really good kind of refresh memory of those subjects. So definitely that's what I would do.
Thank you, Grace. And one thing also to mention is if you enrol in a program with BPP, a couple of months in advance of the start of your program, we'll give you access to our materials in those subjects and various revision resources in those subjects, which will help you get up to speed. And they are tailored to the SQE, so useful to sort of get moving with that material once it's available to you. Somebody else has asked, and maybe Farouk, you can answer this one. How frequently do you practice mock MCQs?
I already knew this was going to be one of the questions, to be fair. Honestly, I think I did around 4,000 MCQs in the span of around 3 months, I want to say. That might seem like a lot, but to me, I felt like that wasn't enough. But until I actually sat the exam, I was like, that's more than enough, to be fair. You'll probably see online some people are doing like, God knows, like 10,000 or something. I think I saw 6,000 once. But to be fair, if you don't have the knowledge, you can't really access the questions themselves. So obviously going with a course provider would allow you to access. And I think, as Grace said, some of you guys might not have obviously studied law or have had a law degree from years ago. It is updated, so you can't really access those MCQs without the actual knowledge. Because if you've seen an SQE question, you're just like, what is this? Why is there 5 options? That was my initial reaction to one of the MCQs. And then when you're confident on one and then you find out it's actually the other reason because of some certain exception or something, then you're like, okay, I understand that. You have to have that knowledge to obviously be able to access that MCQ. So I guess, I did around 4,000 MCQs. BPP provided a lot of exam style questions as well. And I found them really close to the exam itself, in my opinion, at least. Especially like, I think December, a month before, we did like a mock or a summative, sorry, it was. And that definitely helped with the timing, because I learned from doing more questions than was necessary, that I needed to time myself a bit better. And I didn't make that mistake in the exam. In the exam, I actually had like a bit more time left over. So it's not just obviously getting the answer correct, but understanding the process of it as well, the timing. Because whilst you might get like 10 of them right, and you can't access the other ones because of the timing, then that is really an issue that you can't avoid by obviously like enrolling on a prep course, for example.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's very much a technique thing, isn't it? And as you say, timing is very important. I mean, one thing that I've heard from students, and hopefully you'll agree with me, is that some of the questions are not too hard, actually, and you can do them quite quickly, but others will take you longer, and it's just a question of having the confidence to know that you know an answer and move on. But one thing I would just say, just to add to what Farouk was just saying, is that I do think sometimes students think that doing MCQs is a replacement for revising the material, and I'm afraid to say that is not the case. So you always need to plan to make sure that you're confident with that legal material and then use it to practice the MCQs. Somebody from the University of Durham's just asked about accessing further help if you're on a BPP programme, in terms of support with revision and that sort of thing. Does anybody want to talk a little bit about the revision support that they've had? Yeah, Grace, thank you.
Yeah, one thing I found really useful is that BPP has for every single subject, so that's including the underlying subjects as well, a revision forum, and you can post a question on there, and then a tutor will get back to you in the next few days. And it's just so helpful, because you might be revising something and you're like, oh, I don't really understand that. You might try and Google it and you're still confused. So you can literally get an answer from a tutor on any of the subjects in a few days. So I find that really, really helpful. Obviously, you've also got your tutors for the practical subjects. You can drop them an email. So yeah, I found there was a lot of support, actually. It was really helpful.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. All right, let's move on and talk about SQE2 because that's another absolutely essential aspect of what we're talking about here. So SQE2, once you've done the knowledge part, move on to SQE2, which is more focused on skills. But it's really important to understand that actually when they mark you for SQE2, they're marking you 50% for those skills, but also 50% for the knowledge that you're demonstrating in doing those skills assessments. So that's what we mean by the 50-50 split at the top of that slide. So you can't just do SQE1 and say, thank you very much, that's now in the past, off we go. Farouk, for example, having just done SQE1, will need to be hanging on to that knowledge so that he can use it going into SQE2. Can we just click on one more on the slide, just so we can see the written skills? Thank you so much. Because what we have here is the list of skills that you're assessed in. And oral skills, so that's client interviewing and advocacy, are assessed face-to-face. And a really important thing to understand, they're face-to-face and only in certain places in the country. So you can do it in Cardiff, Birmingham, Manchester and London face-to-face for those assessments. So many people have to travel to do the oral skills assessments for SQE2. The written skills, on the other hand, happily, are undertaken in those Pearson VUE test centres. So you may well be able to do SQE2 written skills where you did SQE1 or wherever else is convenient for you. SQE2 is a bit of a monster in that you do 16 little mini assessments effectively, and then all of those different aspects get rolled together into your mark for SQE2. And you will do those skills assessments in a series of different practice contexts. And you will know in advance which they are, but it could be anything within each of those practice contexts. Okay, so it's quite an intense experience. Let's go to our students who know much more about that than me. Let's go to Sam. Tell us about SQE2, Sam.
Yeah, so SQE2 is incredibly intense, I would say. It's hard work. There's a lot that goes into it. Because I think that you have to hold on to that functioning legal knowledge from SQE1, but then you're also putting on top the skills, because obviously the skills of the 50% of the mark, it can get quite intense, and it's a lot of the functioning legal knowledge is across the board all over the skills, so you can't really pinpoint which ones you're going to be doing until closer to the time. But saying that, it sounds weird for me to say, but it's a more enjoyable exam than SQE1. I think SQE1 was incredibly intense and very long, whereas the benefit to SQE2 is it's varied. So because there's 16, you don't necessarily have to be top of your game for every single aspect. There are some room for maneuver. There's room to sort of have a bad one, I would say. So say you come across one of, a case of matter analysis that you just haven't covered and you just can't do it. That's okay, because you've got 15 others that you can, do a great job on, and it gives you a little bit more breathing space, I think, than SQE1, which is the good side to it. I think it's the easier out of the two. I think going into SQE2, I was very panicked that it was going to be really, really hard, and that I would have to be prepared to not know a lot, even though I'd done a lot of work for it. But actually having undertaken the exams, they are easier than I had imagined them to be. I'm not by far saying they are easy. They were just easier than I had imagined, as I had built them up after my experience of SQE1. So yeah, be easy on yourself. Go easy on yourself. Practice, 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 practice. Pull anyone in that you can for being a practice judge or a practice client. The in-person ones are by far the hardest because of your nerves, but everyone's in the same boat. and the more practice you get, the better you're going to come out of that. And really, at that stage, you should already know the functioning legal knowledge. So it really is just practicing the skills and revising the functioning legal knowledge, which practicing all of these exam paper style questions will help you revise your functioning legal knowledge at the same time.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sam. Some good inspiriting words there, I think, for everybody. So let's move on to look at the cost of these things, because, I mean, you can imagine running an assessment with 16 aspects to it is probably quite a pricey thing, and you can see that in the fees here if we just click on. So SQE1, a bit less than £2,000. SQE2, nearly £3,000, and together you're looking at getting on for £5,000. So you have to understand that unless you're an apprentice, in which case this is likely to be paid as part of your apprenticeship, you will be paying these fees unless you can persuade your employer to do it for you. Okay, what that means is you have every incentive to be as well prepared as you can, take these assessments, pay this once and once only, do really well first time, and just keep moving. Okay, so that we would say use a reputable provider, make sure you're very well prepared for the assessments so that you only pay this once. We just move on to the next slide. We just look at pass rates. Now, the national pass rate for SQE1 is not a great read. That's the second column there. And actually July 24 was lower than it's been for a little while. But it's always historically been in the 50%. Now, remember, nobody who has signed up for SQE1 is obliged to have done any preparation at all. I mean, you would be well advised to have prepared yourselves very well, but there will be some of the people in these statistics who've done very little preparation and have found that that is not going to work for them. I'm very pleased to say that our first sit pass rate is considerably healthier than that. So the added value you can see is considerable. Okay, doing a proper course, taking the time, attending your classes, doing your revision, put yourself in the best possible opportunity to be able to pass. There is no doubt these are very difficult exams and that some people won't pass. And you can see even with that data there, even the best candidates, some won't pass. And that's the nature of the beast. And the market is understanding this. The firms understand this. But it's tough for you if that happens to you. But you give yourselves the best possible opportunity by training well. I've got a question from Coventry University, or somebody from Coventry University saying BPP, among other universities, offers an LLM, SQE prep course. That the stats show that increases the pass rate for SQE1 and 2. What sets BPP apart? I won't do our marketing. I might ask my colleagues if they've got anything that they'd want to say. Maybe would each of you mind just saying what you think is the thing that's helped you the most that BPP's done for you in terms of preparing for the SQE? Let's start with Grace.
I would say all the materials. I think, yeah, there's so much with SQE. There's so many unknowns, but BPP is really established in not just the classes, but everything that it gives you. So it's got like some AI powered revision tools. It's got videos. It's got loads of MCQs. For SQE2, it's got loads of extra practice questions because practice questions are kind of gold dust when it comes to SQE2. So I'd just say all those materials. I don't think you can get that anywhere else. And I think they are really good and really helpful materials. And I think that's what ups that pass rate so much.
Thanks so much. Farouk, what one thing do you think you would say recommends BPP from your perspective?
I'd actually say Grace is as well in terms of content and obviously the materials that we have. But to be a bit more like specific and something separate, I guess, would be the actual structure. If you don't like take a course provider, for instance, you're gonna have to make your own structure. You're gonna have to find your own motivation from somewhere, and obviously that discipline that comes with it, that is needed for this monster exam. And to be fair, when obviously you have life going on, you might find it hard to do that yourself. So having a provider actually say, okay, you need to come to the lesson here, we're going to check your attendance and have like these strict policies, it actually does make you go in yourself. Okay, these consequences, if I don't go, my attendance is going to be low, for instance. Okay, I need to sit this mock. It actually just forces you, like, I know obviously using the word force isn't really the best like option here, but it does force you, I guess, because you've got a mock coming up in December, for instance. You have to revise. You have to obviously pass that to even get the LLM, for instance. And then I guess that helps in obviously the actual exam. Because otherwise, if you, let's say you just bought some self-study materials or chose a provider that doesn't obviously offer these kind of things, you might not be inclined as much, if I'm being honest, unless you're a very disciplined person. And I mean, kudos to you if you can do that.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sam?
Yeah, so I wholeheartedly agree with the other two, actually. But to add something another level, what I've really enjoyed about BPP is that they provide like a professional skills coach alongside throughout the whole of the course. So we've been working on our sort of skills side, SQE2 side skills throughout the whole of the course, and you have a sort of a personalized professional skills coach which talks you through this kind of thing, but they're also there for the well-being side of things to talk to you about that. I talk to you about any specific issues or worries you have, and it's not overly you don't need to go to a lot of meetings. I think it's one per term that you have to, but I found them really, really useful, really, really helpful, and it really pulls back your focus onto the skills throughout the whole time as well, which is really useful, I think.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Just to highlight there that Sam is an apprentice and the professional skills coach is an apprenticeship concept. For the non-apprentices, it's slightly different. You have personal tutor, and then you still have that skills work that you do throughout your SQE1. And we do that because actually learning in a practical way, all of this law makes it a much better learning experience. It makes it stick better, and it lays the foundations for you for SQE2. So thank you very much for all of your input there. Let's move on to the next slide, which is all about how to choose your provider. So if we go on to the one after this, there's some key factors here. I think you might need to click a few times just so we get those all up. There are 8 in total things to talk about. So first of all, thinking about costs and funding, you will have to think for yourself how you're planning to fund your program, your learning, but also your assessments. And we've talked about the fact that it's worth doing it once and doing it well to make sure you can really benefit from it and just get through that SQE and get out and be nice and qualified as a solicitor. Interestingly, actually, a lot of our students who are self-funding undertake a master's in order to have access to student loan company funding. And that's a very mainstream thing to do. If you are a domestic student and it is your first master's, you're able to access that funding. I say many people do. At the moment, that's £12,471 for your programme, which won't cover everything, but makes a really, really significant contribution. And we also at BPP have a number of different scholarships and that sort of thing, which a lot of students will use to top up that bit a bit on top. In terms of welfare and support, we've got a question from the University of Westminster. Of course, we know how intense these exams are. We're really aware of it. The students talking to you today have already talked about the intensity of the experience. So we are very aware that it can take its toll on people. Somebody from the University of Westminster has asked, what advice would you give to prepare for the SQE exams? How would you recommend taking care of your mental health during these exams? Would one of you like to talk to this one? Grace?
Yeah, I would say there's a few things you can do. Recognize from the outset that it is an intense period. It's kind of a short time period to do the work. So recognize that it is going to be intense. But at the same time, like Farouk was saying, there is that fear of failing it. You know, and I think you've got to believe in yourself. You've got to have a structure of when you're going to do what work, because I think otherwise you might feel a bit out of control with it. So like we said, BPP really helps with that. And I think if you can have a timetable of what you're going to do when, you know, you can get it done in the time, but also you can specifically plan in time when you're not going to think about SQE1, you're going to have fun with your family and friends, you're going to have downtime. And I think you need to do that because you can't be just constantly working, you know, early till late every single day. You won't be able to do it. So I would say from the very beginning, have your timetable, plan when you're going to do what, and plan time just completely off. And I think that will really help your physical and your mental health as well.
Fantastic, thank you, Grace. We provide students actually with some suggested resources to help them with wellbeing during SQE. There's a number of, you know, just little videos and things that might help people. We have really sort of developed student support networks and facilities at BPP, including learning support team, welfare support, safeguarding team, all these people who are there, personal tutors as well, to really help students sort of where they are. And I think it's really helpful that now that we're a bit more knowledgeable about the SQE, we can preempt a bit some of the anxieties that people have. But it should also be helpful for students to hear from people like the panel today saying, do you know what, actually it's intense, but it's okay. Okay, so there's a lot to take on, but it is all right. Now, regular live teaching, Farouk talked to us about the structure and the fact that for him it was really important to have the expectation you'd be in the classroom and have done your prep. For some people that is absolutely essential. Others, as he was saying, are brilliant at self-motivating, but you need to think really carefully, is that you? Because if it's not you, it gets to be very stressful if you're finding you just simply can't get on the front foot when it comes to preparing for this. Online live versus an app. So many of you, it will suit you to learn online. And, you know, since the pandemic, we've all actually been very good at that sort of thing because we've had to learn how to be really good at it. And we have a really good, at BPP, we have a really good online platform, which is called Adobe Connect, which I've taught through. I think it's a really good setup, and it feels like being in a real classroom. You have breakout rooms, you can share whiteboards, all that good stuff. So you get that bouncing off your colleagues, you get that very interactive experience, like being in a classroom. That's very different from sitting answering MCQs on an app on your own at home, which is what you're in danger of doing if you're not doing some sort of taught programme. Law firm preference and pass rates, if I just take those together, I mean, it's not by accident that most of the law firms around, if they prescribe what their future trainees are going to do, they generally will prescribe them that they must do a taught programme, many with us, some with some of our competitors, but they wouldn't generally expect their trainees just to have learnt themselves quietly in their bedroom or wherever it is, because they see the value that's added by people learning together, people building their knowledge, people being in the classroom with experienced tutors who can help guide their understanding. Okay, and I mean, this actually informs the next one, career prep versus test prep. Yes, SQE1 in particular is an MCQ exam. We can't get away from that. And a lot of what will make you successful in SQE1 is having practice in multiple choice questions. But actually, we firmly believe that if you learn the material properly, you learn it in an in-depth way by having practical activities you're doing in a classroom, that knowledge will stick. If you're then encountering a series of MCQs in that area, you will be able to answer them because your understanding will be good quality understanding. So we're also preparing you to be that trainee solicitor, to be that junior lawyer who can have good reflexes and will understand how law firms work and will be able to be a real credit to their firm from day one. And then just finally, timing. It's one thing just to think about when you're thinking about planning. And Sam was talking about the fact that it can take you a bit longer if you're going to do something like a day release apprenticeship, or if you're going to work part-time, if you're going to study part-time alongside work. But actually, it's not a race. So you need to think very carefully for yourself, what do I need to achieve? What earning do I need to do? Do I think I'd want to do some paralegaling before I do some study? Would I want to think about getting hold of an apprenticeship? Think about what that looks like, and then think about the timing for you that works the best. Okay, and we, for example, but lots of other people too, offer full-time or part-time programs. We offer them face-to-face and online. So you need to think for you, for your life, what works. Okay, now I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to not go to too many more questions for the moment. I just want to work through the slides I have. Then we'll go into the Q&A networking part of the event, and we'll be able to answer lots more questions. So would you mind just moving on to the next slide, please? So just thinking about this then, I talked about master's funding. Many of our students who are self-funded undertake this master's because it allows them to prepare for SQE1 and SQE2. And for example, we'll be doing SQE2 training at the moment. And then Essentials for Practice is the third of that master's. And that helps prepare to get you desk ready for your firm. You can specialise in a different stream, whether it be general practice, commercial or corporate, and that allows you to have that specialist knowledge. The LPC in the old days used to have electives where you would do subjects like this, and the firms really benefited and they really valued it. And really we are effectively doing something a bit like the old electives at the firm's request, but it's something that the market really likes because it means that the trainees are well up to speed with what life is like in a law firm. So that's our main masters. Many of our sponsored students do a version of this as well. So if you ended up with a training contract, you might well end up doing this as well. If we move to the next slide, this is just very briefly, if you are somebody who is a non-law grad thinking about how to get into SQE qualification, we have a different masters, again, which attracts funding for those who are eligible, which is the law conversion course, which is what used to be called the PGDL, and then SQE1. That packaged together as a master's is something a lot of our students will do to help fund themselves. You can then do some SQE2 training alongside that. You do our SQE2 preparation, for example. And you can also do Essentials for Practice as a standalone if you want. That's an option. All right, so that's what a non-law grad would do. Okay, if we move to the next slide, how to prepare for the SQE. I think we're just going to move through that one to BPP Prepared briefly. So we provide you with free resources on our website. So if you want to see what sort of things my colleagues here have been talking about, those BPP materials that help you get ready for the exams, have a look at these materials. You have to register, but if you register, you then get access to these. And these help you see the sorts of things you will get when you enroll with BPP and help you start thinking, what for me will the SQE look like? Is this the sort of thing I want to be doing? All right, one more slide then is just some toolkit items. So that first link is to the SRA's SQE website. Now this is favorited on my browser, very sadly, but that is my job. But if you are somebody who is involved in anything to do with SQE, you also should be favoriting this on your browser. You go in there, it tells you the specification, tells you all about booking for the SQE exams, tells you all the dates, it's where you get your results, how you can apply for adjustments, all of those things. So I need to look at that just as much as you do, because this regime is governed by the SRA, they're in charge, we have to ask them what the story is on a particular point. So get looking at that. The other thing, if you want to just get a bit of an idea of what we're talking about when it comes to the SQE, they've got those sample questions. Now the word Kaplan is there because Kaplan is the organisation that administers the SQE on behalf of the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And then there's a virtual test environment you can go into and just see what it's like to do those lovely multiple choice exams. We move to the final slide then. Thank you, of course, to my co-panelists. We're not finished yet, but this is the end of the first part of the session. One thing just to mention, the QR code on the right is to a thing called SQE TV, which is put together by my colleague Johnny Hurst. Now, it's not a BPP product, it's something that he does independently of BPP, but it contains an awful lot of fun resources to help you understand, demystify different aspects of the SQE. So if you fancy a bit of a laugh and want to see a man in lots of hats / t-shirts, it's a good one to look at. Okay, so thank you for your attention so far. I think one of the Legal Cheek people is now going to come on and just tell us what we should be doing next.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for that discussion, and that was really interesting. I'm sure everyone in the audience has gained a lot from that today. As mentioned at the beginning, do check out our SQE FAQs page for more information on the SQE. One of my colleagues will post the link to this page in the chat again, just so you've got that available. As Caroline has just mentioned, the event is not over yet. We still have networking until 6 p.m. with the BPP University Law School team. So for the speakers, if you could just hang tight for the time being, that would be perfect. And we will direct you over to the networking once the stream ends. For the audience, you will want to click on the Expo tab on the left-hand side of the screen. From there, you will be able to click on the BPP banner and join the networking. I would strongly recommend that you share your audio and video during the networking portion so that you can speak directly to the speakers. So yeah, thank you everyone once again for attending this afternoon's session, and we hope to see you at many more of our events in the future.